Welcome to the Unofficially Opinionated Podcast. My name is Steve, and I'm joined here with Nate,
What's up?
Tim, and Chris.
What's
It's
up?
all
What's
good.
up?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Hey, ready
Chilling,
for a
chilling.
day of deep conversations. Let's get it.
Yes. So what are we talking
This
about?
this this is my first time hosting, so I think we just need to pause and acknowledge that.
Oh,
I
wait a
know
minute.
the rest of you listeners here, you're not used to hearing my voice or seeing my face,
I,
and
I
so
may have something in
yeah, just
recognition
wanted to.
of this lovely moment.
That's right. That's right. All right. So,
Oh, we can
so
hear it this
anything,
time. This guy right here. He's always trying to get those in there. Okay, anyways.
with the claps.
hey, anything happen with you guys interesting this week?
um, yes. For me, I don't know about y'all, but
Oh
for
yeah.
me, I got this job that I had been applying for since for 7 months. I have been talking to these people for 7 months about hiring me, and they finally hired me.
Congratulations.
There's a 2 month what do you call that trial period, which I think I'm gonna need. It's a 2 month that can be transferred or that can be what do you call that renewed. So I'll probably need that because like
Sweet.
after 7 months, I'm just like I don't know if I still want to work with you, you know. So so we'll see. But anyways, at least the effort paid off. So yeah.
Very good. Very
Sweet.
good.
Sweet.
What about you, Christian?
I'm,
Anything
I'm
interesting with
trying
you
to
this
think
week?
what happened this week. I don't think so. It's kind of a boring week. So for you, Tim and Nate, I did attempt to start Wink Saga. I was on lunch one day. I pulled up my phone,
Yes.
opened up Netflix. So I started it. I got maybe 25 minutes in during that one lunchtime. So I mean, I may continue just for the sake of us talking about it. But
Was it the first season?
yeah,
You
first
just the
season.
first
So
season.
my
Okay.
son came in and he saw my Netflix, viewing history. He was like, "Dad, you watching Wink Saga?" And I was like,
You
"Look,
know what? Tell
I'm
him
like,
don't
it's
be
for
hating.
research. Don't worry about it. Mind your business." So, so that was the highlight of my week. Was
Oh my
Wink
goodness.
Saga.
You the show is much better than the cartoon. So
Let's hope.
yeah, Tim, did you watch the whole second season?
No, I did not get around to finishing it, but I'm
You
good.
know,
I
Tim's
I'm
didn't
gonna
busy.
finish
start,
it.
He
so
don't he don't
I'm
he don't
gonna
be
finish it at
doing
work.
our stuff. He out there watching anime only. He don't be
No,
doing this.
no,
Li-
I've been really busy. I don't, I've been really busy with the whole car thing, and then everybody wanting to do stuff, and yeah, I've been really busy. And then the windows still they're about to come back in and put in our real windows like
yeah,
I think next week maybe.
home stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah,
have to get into that, Tim. I'm sure there's a reason for behind why you're so busy, but maybe we'll bring it up later.
Hey, Tim, I relate to you being busy. I've been traveling most of the week, and I feel like whenever I go away, everything kind of piles up, and so you got to kind of dig out from under that, and that is a certain level of busy all into
right.
itself. And so, so that's been what I've been having to deal with this week. So I can relate.
You been traveling,
Oh,
Steve? Where you been?
Yeah, I did a little bit of traveling for work. Just trying to continue to build relationships with IT leaders around the country, and got a chance to do a little traveling for work, and had interesting conversations around AI and
Oh,
healthcare. And
so,
I know there was a couple of
there
podcasts that you guys
were, there
had
were.
talking about that. Yeah,
We
yes.
may have to
yeah.
do
So
a version two.
Did so you stay mostly in the U.S. then when you're traveling?
yes, yeah. My focus is typically on Georgia, but I'll go around the country if it's applicable.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, very good. Well, I think that all of this action in our adult lives, it all kind of comes and is impacted by something that happened prior to us being adults, and so that's the topic for today: how a person's childhood affects them as an adult. And
Oh,
so I am not coming with gloves on. I'm coming with my gloves
let's
off.
do it.
Um,
That's probably a little bit more dangerous. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, yeah, that's what's happening. So I did a little research,
Mhm.
and there was a study. There's always a study. There was a study
Yes.
back in 1997, and two doctors came together, and they created this study called the Adverse Childhood Experience, and they had come up with some information. They came up with this list of 7 items or 7 things that if a child were to have these 7 things
Hmm.
happen, that they would more likely be in a successful adult. I guess we can go into the argument of
Ooh,
what does success
I
mean,
want to know what
but
these 7 things are. Okay, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I will share those with you. But this is the unofficially opinionated podcast, so I came up with my own unofficial list.
That's what's up.
Okay, okay.
I didn't do any research. I just took
Uh
anecdotal
oh.
ad hoc. This sounds like it makes sense to me.
All right,
These
Tim. All right,
these
Tim. This is
things as a childhood,
your kind of guy.
these things these things in your childhood do impact you as an adult. So I came up with my list, but I'll read through the 7 items first. We'll
Okay.
talk through those where it's relevant, and then we'll go into my list, and then we'll finish up the episode. Um, and so these two doctors, the first things that they said was uh, for this child, when you're a child, if you have the ability or if you're able to speak with your family about your feelings.
Oh,
Mm.
Um,
okay.
I thought this was interesting. I had to think back. I think we can go down a couple of different rabbit holes of why couldn't you speak to your family about your feelings. I guess there could be a lot of little nuances there at play, but what do you guys think about that? How do you think that would make you be a successful adult if you're able to share your
Wait,
feelings with your
because
Uh,
child?
we talk a lot, so I think go down the seven first, and then we'll like jump into that because we talk a
yeah,
lot.
it might be a
We talk a
podcast
lot.
around
Okay.
point number one. It will never get on.
Right.
Yeah, because I had about
Exactly. So
25 comments. So let me just, I'll just
All right.
exactly.
We'll never
All
make
right.
it.
All right. All right. All right. Um, okay. So number two, uh, so this child they felt that their childhood. Okay, let me make sure I read this right. I got them here in my notes here. So it says that my felt that my childhood stood by me during difficult times, that my
mm,
family stood by me during difficult
okay.
times. So that's number two.
Okay.
Number three, enjoyed participating in community traditions. Number
Traditions. Ugh.
four,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
felt a sense of belonging in high
Mm-hmm.
school.
Okay. Hmm.
Number five, felt supported by
Mm-hmm.
friends. Number six, had at least two non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then number seven, which is the last, felt safe and protected by an adult in the home.
Got it. Got
Okay. So let me get. I wrote this down because I just wanted
it.
to make sure. So you were able to talk about your feelings with your family. Your family stood by
Mm-hmm.
them in difficult times. You
Mm-hmm.
celebrated traditions.
Mm-hmm.
You had a sense of belonging in
In
high
high
school.
school. Mm-hmm.
You felt supported by your friends, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Uh, s- Wait, am I missing one? Yeah, because you said seven, right? Because I supported by your friends and safe. You felt safe and secure. What was the seventh one?
Had at least two non-parent
Oh,
adults who
right.
took a genuine interest in
Genuine
you.
interest.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. All right. So where are we going with
Yeah, well,
this?
one quick thought that I did have as I heard that list was the first one to me might be somewhat culturally biased toward how we operate in the
Mm-hmm.
US. That's just my first thought about that particular one, as far as expressing your feelings at home and what that really means. Because I
Well,
would imagine some cultures that isn't the way that they operate, and it's not as important as it might be in certain other cultures.
do you
That's my
think that's
first thought on
true?
that.
I I would tend to disagree with that. I tend to think that because humans all come with a bunch of emotions and whatever, and they generally want to share that with other. We're social creatures, so we generally want to share that with. Usually, if we're younger, we want to share that with our family because that's pretty much all we know, right? We have family, and then we end up have friends. But Chris is right. In a lot of cultures, even in the French culture, sharing your feelings with your family isn't necessarily a thing that's often done. That comes from any specific. I think it comes from any specific family type. Like, for example, if people felt if a kid felt like they weren't listened to by their family, they're probably going to make bigger strides to listen to their kids when their kids talk to their own kids, you know? So then they're going to make that a cultural, a family value to actually let the kid feel like they're being listened to. So, and I think that's one of all the 7 points that you brought up, that's probably one of the ones that, whew, that kind of hits home. Actually, that's probably a really poignant one for a lot of people, to be
Yeah.
honest. So,
Can I just chime in just for a second to so I think you guys are right, and I wanted to give a little more background, a little more color to this to make it a little more specific. Um, I almost wonder how do we determine like who is what does a successful adult look like? And because remember they're saying that these things would result in that or these would contribute to making that more likely to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And so that the quick thought I had was a successful adult is a person who can cultivate healthy relationships. If you're able to cultivate and maintain healthy relationships, you're doing something that probably most people can't do. I think most people have a hard time cultivating and maintaining healthy relationships for long term.
hmm,
I think we could look at the marriage stats. I think that most people get divorced than stay married over time.
yeah.
And I think that's because it's hard to cultivate a relationship. Think about parent-child dynamic. Um, I feel like that's how nursing homes exist. And maybe it's not that simple, but I think that there's a number of people who maybe are unable to take care of their parents, but there's some people that just put their parents in nursing homes, and that may be a play at relationships. I think about even career wise we go and network, but are these really healthy relationships? What does a healthy relationship look like? I think what it looks like is you're able to share your feelings. That's what a healthy relationship probably looks like. I don't know, do you guys
Yeah,
agree with
I
that?
go ahead, Nate.
I, in part, I do. In part, I think success is a number of factors, but yes, in part, I do think that you're correct. It does require the ability to make and maintain uh, relationships.
Yeah, I think it's also part of the relationship piece is knowing, how to appropriately function in society. So is kind of the relationship generally to society and kind of knowing how to operate within your cultural context in a way, right? Because um in the US, it's much more individualistic. Now, that's not to mean that we're selfish, but to a degree, you have to know how to operate in that environment. And so you have to take certain lessons of growing up in your culture to know how to act in that culture. Whereas other cultures are more about community. And so if you grow up there learning the wrong lessons, then you don't really fit and you can't function in that society. So to me, I think it's a relationship, but also, you know, having a good childhood helps you understand your place in that particular society in which you operate and how to appropriately interact with people, the social cues, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. Because I find a lot of people seem to not know or don't care about how to, I say, act in public or how to act around people. Like they feel like however I want to behave, I should be able just to do, and that
Yeah,
everyone else should just accommodate that. Whereas
I
that's
th-
just not how we would deal. And I guess also relationship, but also to me, it's a little bit beside relationships as far as kind of more of a cultural societal interaction. But yeah, for sure.
yeah. So
Hmm.
when I said the relationships was a part, that also what Chris said is also a part. I don't think it's the only thing. I think it's a many different things combined together. Plus, success looks differently to different people. You
Hmm.
know, um, but the ability to achieve your own personal success is dependent on, in general, what happened in the past. Because if you haven't learned key skills, like making friends, like being able to put yourself out there, like being able to talk to people, like being able having good work ethic and stuff like that, if you haven't if you haven't worked on those or learned those when you were younger,
Oh,
it's going to be much harder to establish your own success when you're older.
yeah,
So
that's a whole nother podcast, Nate. Just around, it's amazing how many people don't have the skill of learning.
oh yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like taking the experience, processing that, and then using the information going forward to like better either do your job or life, you know, what happened to you, right? But
Right.
being able to learn from that is another skill, so that it's not just, oh, it just happened and I just go forward, but how do I take what happened, use that, and go forward in a better way.
All right. Hey Tim, what do you think?
I'm listening to everything you guys are saying. I pretty much agree with it. Like you know, with kids of my own, I understand that when you allow your kids to speak their minds and you listen to them about how they feel about certain things. Sometimes you have to encourage them to tell you that, because I've noticed that's not something that's natural to just share your feelings. It's not, you know, it's not natural all the time. It's especially like um, sometimes I have to over encourage my children to, like, yeah, it's a good thing to do this. But
But do you
go ahead.
think that's a learned thing, Tim? Do you think that's a
Sharing your
learned thing where
feelings.
they either sharing your feelings or not sharing your feelings? What do you think is more innate for your kids? To
I
want to share them and then feel like they can't, or to feel like they shouldn't and then you having to encourage them to do so?
um I think I don't think I don't think they would ever think that they couldn't. I just don't think that was something that we had to build confidence in them to know that for them to know that it's okay to share their feelings with us. You know.
So Tim, do you yourself often share your feelings with your children? Because I wonder, to kind of Nate's point,
Or spouse?
right? Well,
I'm
like
like my
do they see you doing that? Because for me, that wasn't really thinking about, go back to childhood. Like, I don't
mhm.
recall a whole lot of feeling sharing, right? So
Yeah.
I never, it wouldn't occur to me to do a lot of that in my home, and it wasn't a
Mhm.
thing that we did. So that's something that now is something I have to actually intentionally do, because that wasn't common in the household. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm scared to share my feelings. It's just, from what I saw, like, that wasn't the context. I'm just curious, like, in your home, like, is it that you and your wife share a lot and your kids just still seem to be not doing that? Or is it just because maybe you don't realize, but you don't even share, but you're still trying to teach them to do it, even though it's not natural
So
to you?
so I'll say this. So for me growing up, um, my mom. She was the kind of person where she didn't spare anything on her mind. If she had something to tell you, she's gonna tell you. No matter how messed up it was or great it was, she's gonna tell you directly, and then she's gonna leave it with you, because that's just the kind of person she is. She's gonna tell you this. I'm gonna leave it with you. So because of that, you know, it made me a very dialogue heavy person. My wife tells me I talk too much. Um, yeah, right. So it made me a very dialogue heavy person, and I don't just and there's other things too. Like, I don't just react to stuff, but like, so I would like so the relationship with my mom and I were so open when I was young. Um, when I was like 9, 10, almost 10. I used to my mom used to smoke cigarettes, right? I used to take them cigarettes and throw them out the window. She hated me for that, but I never got in trouble for it. So, um, and I tell her in her face, you need to stop this. So she stopped. But that's just the dynamic between us. My mom was like, you don't hold nothing back, because if you don't say nothing, you don't get nothing. You And the only thing at the end of that, you'll be like, well, I never had a chance. Well, you didn't try because you didn't say it, you didn't talk it, you didn't speak it. So hold on a second.
Mm, that's good. That's good. Hey, Christian, I wanted to throw something back at you, a follow-up
Yeah.
question, because I think what Tim said, that was pretty, very good, very interesting perspective. Now, you mentioned something about race. Maybe there's a racial bias here. Is there an example that you can give off the top of your head where not being able to share your feelings with your family, cultural or non-cultural, where that's a strength or that would lead to a, maybe we'll just describe this theoretical person, a successful adult? Like where would that hurt you?
So what I was thinking of, I was listening to a podcast the other day. It's called the name escapes me, but it's a podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about the idea of emotions and how kind of our Western way of viewing emotions as something that's tangible and kind of internal is really the
Mm,
way that we in the West internalize that. And the way they showed that was they had a question to some Japanese individuals around, can you describe the intensity of this emotion? And they didn't know how to answer the question because for
mm,
them that even that paradigm didn't even make sense culturally to them. Like emotion isn't intense because emotion isn't a thing internally; it's something that happens between people. It's kind of how they were talking about it. So in that context, in certain contexts, how you behave in the society is more important than kind of your own personal idea of independence. Whereas in the US, we kind of are trained to be independent, whereas other side is you're trained to be a part of the community. And so being a part of the community might mean you don't speak your mind as much because of the community, right? Your place is here, and so you know your place and you speak when appropriate, but not always, oh, I have feelings, so let me express them because I'm an individual. So that's kind of what I was thinking of in the context of different cultures where speaking your mind and being an individual might mean something different in a different context. So, there it might be more important to value the family and the community versus my individual need to express my personal opinion in this moment.
But I
mm.
think we discussed this before. Is that something that you would do to your own detriment, or I mean, excuse me, are you going to keep doing that because society requires you to do that, even though it might be harming yourself?
Well, again, the way I look at it is in that cultural context, I think you can be a very healthy person because that's the dynamic of the culture. You're right. It's a different way of being. And so it's not like you're repressing things. It's just that's how the culture works. Whereas if you're kind of going against the culture and you're kind of doing something unnatural, then I think you kind of are at a disadvantage in a different context. It's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Because well, I think the assumption would be that if uh, you go over here over to I don't know where were they? China? Where'd you say where they were
This
at?
was Japan, but it's kind
Oh,
of
Japan.
a different, yeah.
Yeah, so if you go over there and you meet just what you would one would consider like a general, like, well, I don't know, I don't want to say normal because no one's really normal, but just s- someone who would generally fit into general society, and you ask them this question, they would respond in that way because that's what they have been taught. But then if you take somebody who is on the fringe of this society, right, who who has been taught that, but there's something else inside them that they're not able to express. Are they going to have the same outlook as the person that fits like in the middle, like they sit in the middle of the society, so they don't have any issue with the way it works? But these people that are on the fringe, they are they going to have the same response? I would highly doubt it, just because I've seen it. Anyways, from an LGBTQ point of view, I've seen how they felt like they've had to leave Japan, well, China, obviously that would make sense, but and excuse me, and some other Asian countries or cultures, I suppose, they would have to leave because they didn't feel like they were able to express themselves the way they wanted to, the way that they needed to be able to live with society.
And I think I agree with Nate to some degree. I feel like your ability to express is your ability to flex that muscle. And I feel like if you're unable to talk to your family, I almost wonder, well, then who could you talk to? I mean,
Right.
I guess there are situations where the family has abandoned you, there's toxic situations, and then you create a new family. That might be a thing, but I almost feel like you have to be able to talk about it. But I guess in this question, it's a matter of can you talk about it with the people that are supposed to be maybe the closest to you due to
Right.
bloodline.
Right.
So I almost feel like you become more mature and a more well-rounded. It's a humanity question almost to some degree. But what makes you human? And I think suppressing your emotion, the assumption is you don't have anyone else to speak to about your emotion. I almost feel like that there's a term for this. I think if you don't do it, you're not going to feel it or something, and you turn into a type of person. But
Yeah.
I could be
Yeah, I would
jumping
imagine
here.
if you're suppressing, I was just thinking about the cultural context of if culturally we express emotions less, right?
Mm,
Overall, right?
mhm,
If we try to compare someone there to how we do it here and try to say, well, we
mhm,
express everything and they're expressing less, so that means that they aren't as successful. Because I mean, if you look at it, is are these whole countries and societies less successful because as a culture they don't express as much emotion? I would
mhm.
tend to say maybe I wouldn't say they're not as successful, right?
I
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
say
be
that
like, oh, as a
they're no.
culture they are maladapted, right? And they don't
Right.
function well. So that's what I was getting at, was just that I think that there's some variation in the intensity of it, but I do think, Steve, to your point, I do think in the context of your culture, you should be able to express, the appropriate amount of emotion to kind of those closest to you. And when you don't have that piece, I do think it is detrimental, or at least can hinder certain types of growth.
But Steve, I'm
Very
curious to
good.
hear your 7 points that you had come up with.
Aha.
I really think that conversation we just came from was compelling. I know we have to move on, and I'm trying to look for my timer here. But anyways, you guys just give me the sign. Okay, let me read what I have, and then let's jump back up to the few others here on the researchers
Mm-hmm.
list,
Hmm.
which are more official, and then we can jump to my and go back. We can go back to my unofficial. So what I said is that I took a very specific angle on this, and what I did was I answered this particular question: what elements of childhood, some of this you get to choose, some of this you don't get to choose, what elements of your childhood where decisions are needing to be made, do these decisions drastically impact the outcome or the resulting adult, the output of those decisions? And so what I said was, as a child, where you're born, whether you're in the US or where you are in the world, that is something that will impact whether you're going to be a successful adult or the type of adult you will end up being. I guess you guys may disagree with me, but I would suggest, well, if my definition of a successful adult is a person that can have a healthy relationship for long term, then maybe anywhere in the country, as long as you have another person you can engage with, you possibly can have a relationship that lasts a long time. But I feel like there are some uh, countries, their culture, like you guys kind of described, where the culture does define how the people are. And I think that that will drastically impact the childhood and the adulthood experience completely. And so I would just contrast that from the United States to China. I mean, you got communists and you got non-communists, right? So that's one thing I had on my list. Another thing is, do you have a relationship with your mother and your father? I feel like I've had many conversations with people who either didn't know one or both of their parents, and I won't say that. It seems as if there's a correlation to those folks um, having something there that is like that's missing. I remember having a conversation with one of my friends recently about um, um, their childhood and how there was the parents got divorced, a new person came in. It was, quote unquote healthy and stable, but what happened is that this person was still yearning to know who their father really was, what happened, just trying to understand, and it impacted them all the way up. Like even right now, we're still having that conversation. We just don't know how it's impacting them. Like we don't know what it would look like if the person had not had to deal with this baggage, um, but we're seeing how it's affecting them and how they're trying to um, process and deal with that. Another thing, I said religious faith group. I'm not sure if you have a choice there. You're just kind of born into a family that may have chose something, and that gets imposed on you. And then at some point, you may get a chance to choose. Maybe you don't, until you're able to just kind of leave the household. So that's another one that will impact you as an adult. Your physical health. I don't know if you guys grew up or knew anyone when you were younger that had a physical disability. I remember in elementary school, I knew a child that only had one eye, random,
Yes.
impacted them big time,
Jeez.
you
Well,
know,
I can imagine.
uh, and it was because of cancer.
Mhm.
Oh,
So just goes layers and layers. So that was another piece that just impacts your ability to be successful as an adult, or even be an adult for that matter. I'll run down the rest of my list here. Your education, the class, the level of class that you're in your country, race plays a big important piece there, family structure, personality slash temperament, and then mental health. That was my list of things. These things all will impact you as you're a child. These areas, depending on what happens in these areas, would greatly impact you as an adult. It may prevent you from being that quote unquote successful adult because of all of this baggage you're having to deal with. And so that was just my unofficial list.
I mean, I definitely agree with what you said. I don't remember exactly every single point, but as you read it off, yeah, I agree. They do. Excuse me. Well, what happens is that they impact your way of thinking, you know, which can, but it doesn't mean it has to negatively impact you, your way of thinking per se, um, but it's highly likely that one of those things is going to negatively impact you, meaning that you're probably going to put up a wall, or you're probably going to reflect on this in a way that is unhealthy for your success. You know, yeah, I would agree with that. There might be more, but yeah, I would agree with that list.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think they're definitely kind of like keystone factors. I wouldn't say they're necessarily determinative. I think these factors can either make an easier road or a more difficult road. And how you are equipped during childhood to manage those pieces, I think, is important. You know, you can grow up low class, you know, wrong side of the tracks, you know, black, whatever, all these things against you. But if you have someone in your life that can help teach you how to navigate those things and work through those things, then you can come out and be very successful. But you do need very often. Now there are people that come out of it by themselves miraculously. That happens, but that's not the general rule of things, right? Unless there's someone in your childhood that kind of help you navigate these things, all that stuff piled up against you, you know, you may grow up to be maladjusted and have to kind of deal with that as an adult versus kind of get into adulthood kind of ready to step into it and move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, there's this conversation made me think of so when I was growing up, right? I mean, I grew up in the ghetto, like super under the line of poverty. Excuse me. In California, Southern California, racist like 110%. And yet, while I was there growing up, I didn't realize that there was a difference between people, the color of people's skin. I remember this vividly. And the time when I realized what that there was a like what racism I guess kind of looked like was actually with you, Steve.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I remember.
You
I
remember that? You
remember.
remember?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember.
But before then, I didn't realize. I guess,
So
which
Nate,
is funny
are you
too
gonna tell the
because my
story, Nate,
mom
or
was
just
there.
gonna leave it there and just move on? Like this is kind
Oh,
of a
sorry. Yeah, no, I can.
cliffhanger.
Do you want me to tell the story, Steve? It wasn't. It wasn't a big.
You tell me how you feel. I'm not going to throw any punches, but I feel fine sharing.
No, it was. I remember we were at a store, but I don't remember which store it was.
Doesn't matter. We
Yeah,
were at a store and I pointed something out to you. I
yeah.
said,
He
"Hey,
pointed.
watch this."
Yeah, there was
I said, "Watch
And
a
this."
security guard. I
you were
think
like
it was.
teenagers, right? Like what,
Yeah, yeah.
15, 16, somewhere
I
in there?
think
Were we teenagers?
Had to have
we were
been.
like, I
I
don't
don't know.
know. I mean, probably teenagers. Yeah, yeah. Because I think I got to Seattle. I mean, I started going to church when I was like 14, I think, something like that. So yeah, I was definitely teenagers. But excuse me. Yeah, there was a security guard. I think it was an electronics store, if I'm not mistaken. But we were walking around, and then Steve, yeah, he pointed him out, and he was like, I don't remember exactly what you were saying, but you said, you were like
I
watching or
said, "Watch
something.
this."
Yeah.
Listen. I told you, watch. Here's what's gonna happen, and then I I mean, it happens.
Yeah, because he was like,
I
he
s-
said he was following us, and I was like, no, he's not. He's
yes.
just like, he's just doing his job, and apparently he was following us. I mean, I had nothing to reference it to, so I couldn't say exactly if he was following us, but it did happen that every time we turned around, he was there. You know?
Listen. Let's make this real clear.
Yeah,
I'm not blaming anyone for anything, but when a person goes from one aisle on purpose to another aisle, then comes back and then goes back and then go. I mean, this is not natural. This is very
Right.
unnatural. On our behalf, we're unnatural right now in the sense that we're not being suspicious. We're just doing what normal people do when they're shopping. But I think at that time too, I just pick up on things, and I was shocked that you were kind of doubting me.
yeah,
That's what blew my
right.
mind. I was like, well, this is obvious stuff. How do you not see this? So it goes into something where your awareness of what's going on impacts you as a
Yeah.
child. It makes you think things. And what if I had not mentioned that to you that day? I mean, I don't know. I guess I've ruined your life a little on that day.
Hmm.
I don't know if it made you stronger.
I
Maybe
think.
I made you
He'd have
stronger
figured
that
out
day. I
I
don't
mean,
eventually.
know.
I guess you said it again.
I said you would have figured out eventually.
I mean,
Hopefully.
I don't know if I would have. That was something that was like really like in my face. I wouldn't, because it's not something I think about. I don't. I just generally just do not think about race and stuff like that. Like it's whatever. So the fact that he brought it up made me remember. So okay, so when I was growing up, they had the whole Rodney King. Y'all remember that, the whole
Hmm.
Rodney King situation or whatever, and I didn't understand what that was about, right? So we had this
Interesting.
whole entire Rodney King thing. My mom, I remember, she told me, she was like something about the cops. I was really young, but she was telling me something about the cops, and it just did, it just really went over my head. So I don't know if I would have caught on, but it's not. I don't feel the worse off for it. I don't feel the worse off for him, enlightening me, because I then that helps me to look at. So I didn't notice it afterwards. Like I never really paid attention to it afterwards if I was in the store or anything like that. But it did help open my eyes to other things that might have been going on. For example, pay disparity. Uh, excuse me. That's the right word, right? Disparity. Uh, excuse me. Um, I remember for a long time, even when I went to Andrews, I kind of thought that racism had died down until we went to, there was this like assembly or whatever where this pastor came and he just started, I forgot for what it was, but he just started talking about race, or like racism. He's like, it's alive and well and stuff like that, and I was not aware of that.
This is
So
so interesting to me, Nate. So, why do you think it is that even at the age of, say, 14, 15, even the idea of racism still didn't seem like real to you? Because for me, even I don't think I grew up in any particular racist area, but I was still, and maybe somehow it's from my parents, but I was still aware. Now, I don't think I saw it personally very often, but
mhm.
I still feel like by that point, I was definitely aware that it was a thing that was still existing. And it wasn't, and I still would always feel, maybe it's just because schools I went to, when you're often like the black kid, that can go two ways. Either one, you don't notice, or two, you always notice. Right. And so I think for me, it's like, oh, I'm always the different one in this context. So I'm always aware that there is a difference. Where I think maybe for you, it was more, I don't see it. And I'm just curious, how
I,
how you think that came to be for you.
I mean, I'm trying to think what I quite naturally, I am I give people the benefit of the doubt. So when Steve was telling me about it, I just assumed he was doing his job. I didn't feel attacked, right? I didn't feel like I was being followed. But when Steve was just highlighting it, I was like, "Is this a real thing?" So I literally had to go and talk to my mom about it. Like I had to ask her if this was a thing. Like I was like, "Is this?" Whatever. But and
Interesting.
I didn't do it right away, but I did have to ask. Uh, when I was in like elementary school, my best friends, one was white and one was Mexican, you know, and I was black, but I didn't realize that there was a difference. I just I I didn't realize. I didn't realize that there was a difference. I just remember we were really close friends. We didn't stay together because it was elementary school, and then I moved away, so I didn't, and we didn't have like social media, so there was no way to remain in contact. And I actually kind of wish I had been able to stay in contact, but yeah, I don't really know why. Also, I think I'm very much a peacemaker, you know. So even if I had seen it, I might have just wanted to make it not a thing.
I have an answer. I think I know why Nate doesn't see it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this is true. I'm just gonna make it up. But this is my unofficial opinion. My unofficial opinion is I think that maybe Nate had other things that was preoccupying his awareness that this became so low on the list he became blind to it.
Okay,
And I
okay,
don't know what
Doctor
that could
Steve.
possibly
Okay,
be,
Doctor
but
Steve.
I really
Well, are you
do.
referring to my sexuality? Is that what you're referring to?
No, it doesn't have to be about that. It could be just about a child who has things going on in their
Yeah.
life that is more important. I mean, you just described something. Oh, I came from well below the poverty line. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that could blind you to a lot of other things that are not great, but that are not necessarily preventing you from eating. That's
Yeah.
a big
Well,
deal.
I have to admit, so I know that I came from behind, we were poor, but I didn't know that we were poor. I know now that we were poor as I was growing up, but at the time I didn't know that we were poor. But I did know,
Pa-
however, I did know that there was a lot of things I wasn't able to do that I wanted to do, you know?
Hey, Nate, I don't mean to cut you
Yeah,
off.
yeah, tell me.
Let me just make sure I'm keeping track with you here.
Break it down.
You didn't notice race. You didn't know you were poor.
No,
You didn't. To be honest with you, I almost want to say
you're naive.
that no. It's not being naive, but I think you not being aware protects you to some degree. It protects you in your mental health. I think having to wait to carry this baggage at a very young age, that is the whole
That's a good
issue
point.
of childhood being impacted in such a way where now as an adult. I mean, imagine if you're having if you're aware of these racial issues your whole life, and as an adult, how you have to deal with that versus if you're just coming into that awareness like 30 or 40 years. I mean, to be honest, there are some people groups now that are just becoming aware that there actually is an issue.
Hmm. I,
And sometimes it could come across that they seem like they're ambivalent. Is that the right word? Or they don't care as much. And it's maybe because, like I said, they haven't had to live with it. So it could be anything. It could be you're poor, having to be aware of that your whole life is going to impact how you deal with life as an adult coming from being poor. You know what they say? They say you can take a person out of being poor, but you can't take the poor out of them or something. There's a
oh
there's
yeah,
a
you can
strange
take
saying
a
about that.
person
Yeah.
out
It's
of
like
the ghetto, but you can't take the
Yeah.
ghetto out the person or
Yeah.
Yeah.
whatever.
right,
Sometimes
and
that
that and,
sweet
and it's a mental
ignorance,
thing.
Sometimes what?
Yeah, yeah.
that sweet ignorance
Yeah.
of the real facts that you're poor. It just I agree with Steve actually on that. If you don't know when you're a kid, you kind of don't have to live with that baggage as you grow up, and it changes how you see the world. You know, and
Yeah.
it's like it's basically like like me. I hear like from like my grandparents and stuff. Um, they grew up in the South. You know, they grew up in Louisiana. So a lot of that stuff that they brought with them was shared to me, you know,
Mm.
and I have to now mentally negotiate on things. So when I hear stuff, if I just let myself just flare out on everything I hear, I could, but I have to. It's like no, no, no. Is this worth my energy and time? Is this what's the benefit of this? I have to go through this whole analysis just to just to figure out what it is I'm hearing and how I'm supposed to react to it. But if I just went off basic stuff I heard on like from my grandparents, and man, they told me some tragic stuff. And
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so if I just went off of that, you know, that baggage, I could flare out a lot of stuff. I would be one of those people on on social media just flaring out about everything because
Yeah,
you know
because they do.
Yeah.
you're right.
They do.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting to me, Nate, because you talk about not realizing you were poor in the moment. I remember, when we lived in Michigan, I recall being on food stamps. I recall people bringing groceries to our house, right? Because we didn't have food. And this is like third, fourth grade, right? And that experience stayed with me to where when we actually weren't really struggling, I would still, as a teenager, still not ask for certain things because in my mind, like we still can't afford it. As I got older, my dad was like,
Mm,
"Look, you could have asked, like we could have done it," but in my mind, I still wasn't comfortable asking for things. Where my siblings, they'd ask for stuff all the time and they would get it, and I'm sitting
mm-hmm,
here kind of like, don't y'all realize we can't really, like, what are y'all asking for stuff
That
for? Like we can't do all that, but like we could. But for me, having remembered the struggle, like it
mm-hmm,
was real to me, and so I was still kind of like, look, we can't be doing all this extra stuff because we can't really afford it. And I would be shocked when we would do things. I'm like, how are we doing this? Like this doesn't make any sense to me. Where's this money coming from? We don't have money. And we were never rich, obviously, but it was just, we had kind of moved past that point. But I still remembered struggling. I remembered, having government insurance. I remember literally cans of government like canned goods, right? The white thing with the label is just like beans, right? Like I
oh,
remember
government
yours is
these
white,
things.
stuff.
ours is brown.
Right. Yeah, but like, like I remember and it wasn't like, oh, this is just a different brand. Like I knew like this is
Yeah,
because we don't have money. Like we're going to the food bank because we can't afford groceries. Like we're drinking milk, like regular milk. We would have preferred to drink like soy milk, but since we can't buy the groceries, then we're gonna eat what they give us, which is this cereal and this milk. So
right.
I think that also affected me growing up is kind of being aware of those things. And it's interesting to me that having probably at least some experience to some degree was like it's all good. Like, and I think a part of it is just personality. Whereas I'm much more cynical and you're much more optimistic. So I think your natural bent towards optimism and I can do anything, I think may have helped you move through that differently versus me kind of, I don't know if the cynical part was already there, but I
or
was kind of aware of these things all the
or
time.
because he doesn't have the baggage. Because I went through the same thing too. So I am not I'm not unaware of the food bank line and the brown money. Okay, we used to trade that brown money for real money. I'm already aware on that.
Yeah,
So
they did.
um maybe because I myself I am kind of cynical too. I think optimism can come through a lot easier when there is no baggage. So I knew what was going on, but like I said, I grew up. My mom told me, so she was that kind of person where it's like, hey, we ain't got no food tonight. Have a great life, go be productive, that kind of thing. And so, uh, you know, we it's
You know
easier to
what?
be optimistic when you don't have that kind of baggage. Is what I was gonna say.
But I think I
As
think
you
I
as
think,
you
think Nate had the baggage. Like I think he was in the
Yeah,
same
we had
place.
baggage. We had baggage. I actually, as I'm listening to you all, I was just trying to think. I'm like, was I, like just completely not there for like all of my childhood? I'm thinking, and I'm realizing I am amazed that you all remember, like, not just remember this, because I remember. I remember we. I don't remember we were. I knew we were on food stamps, but I knew we were on food stamps because my mom told me we were when I got older, right? So I was not aware that we were. So my mom must have been really good at hiding, this stuff. I remember the things that I remember are actual events. Like I remember, for example, my mom was hustling, so she had a restaurant going out of our house. Like I remember that. But I never. Uh, that's amazing that you all are so aware of what was happening. I was not aware. I was not. I didn't. I don't know. I guess I just never. Yeah. Well, you gonna say something?
I want to say this, and I'm trying not to. Do I?
Insult
Should I
me?
hold my tongue? No,
Make it plain, Steve. Make it
this
plain.
Yeah.
this is this is not about insulting anyone.
Tell the
You just
truth.
tell me
Shame the
when to
devil.
stop. But we all had baggage, number
Yes,
one.
definitely.
Right.
It was just some people had heavier baggage than others. Number two, I also think that at the time and in reflection, I had the impression that we all had ways of coping with what we were dealing with. We all had ways of coping. I almost want to say that you're part of you not being as aware, Nate, and that sounds bad, but you were in a very you were in a place where you could be safe. I guess I would say it that way. I almost wonder if some of that was intentional. You may have had a glimpse of something and then learned to cope with things in such a way that you could remain in a place of a healthy mindset. Because I can reflect on all of you guys actually, and I'm not going to go into the details, but I could recall things that I felt were, oh, that's how he's coping. Oh, that's how he copes with things. And I think that coping mechanisms are part of that um, fallout, some of that baggage that we carry into adulthood, and we still try to cope with things in the same way we did as a child, even if that same trigger isn't there. And so that is something that's very difficult to overcome because half the time we're not even aware of we're using these things as coping mechanisms. We're just trying to be safe.
Well, I'll put myself out there. Is there a specific mechanism you think I'm using to cope, or you think I was using perhaps, or maybe still am, to cope with?
I want to say my impression is that it's connected to you not maybe being as aware of things as early as maybe others. I don't know if you, I don't believe you're ignoring something. And I don't think people need to tell you things. I really think that you're really, really bright and you're very, very aware. But I think too that there comes a equilibrium in our ability to process information. And I know that one thing is that you like to laugh. And I feel like our times together were your opportunity to laugh and release and to be in a safe space. I don't know how often you did that outside of us, not to say we're some special group, but you may do it all the time. But I almost want to say that that may somehow be connected. I just don't know. But it's just interesting to reflect on these things. We're all doing what we need to be safe. We're trying to protect ourselves from threats. I think that's part of humanity. But I just don't. I can't tell you. Oh, this is that one thing. I could tell. I mean, I don't know if I should say one thing about
Bring it
Christian,
up.
but there's something in my mind about Christian. When we met Christian, and that's a whole conversation how we met Christian. But but when I met Christian, he used to do a lot of
Oh, he
drawing. He used to
did. He
draw
did.
Right.
Right.
cartoons, and particularly he would draw Disney cartoons. Interesting. Why is this guy drawing Disney cartoons? I don't know. Like I remember helping Chris. I don't know, Chris, you remember? I helped you
Yeah,
move
I
multiple
remember.
times, but I don't remember talking to you or hanging out with you when I
No,
helped
I
you
don't remember
move.
that either. Yeah, I remember seeing you. I'm like, oh, that's the dude that goes to this church that we're going to. All right, cool.
But you didn't talk to me. So all I'm saying is this: I would watch you, and I would be like, that's interesting. I'd watch, observe, and I'm still this same way. That may be my coping mechanism, but it's just interesting how we all have we all have ways of trying to be safe. I don't remember you ever drawing once you started hanging out with us. It's like you stopped,
Yeah,
right?
I
He
really
kept
did.
drawing for a little
Yeah, a
bit.
little bit, but yeah, I really, I think once I found computers, like most other interests of mine, just mostly fell away. I think that's really what happened. Was I used to draw
Mm,
because, like, that's what I would do, and then I met you guys, and we would have our gaming magazines in church or whatever, and we'd be reading those, and I kind of got more into actually like technology and kind of those things, and the drawing thing just kind of, for me, I never felt like I was a good at drawing. So why I do those Disney things was because at a point I would like copy certain things to draw them. And then I kind of memorized, okay, this is how I'm going to draw Mickey. And I memorized it. So I would just kind of doodle it and draw it often. But I never saw myself as an artist. I was like, I can copy these 5 things. That's what I do, but I'm not good at it. So, and for me, if I'm not good at it, then why am I gonna? I'm not gonna keep doing it. That's just how I feel. I was like, well, okay, that was fun when I was, little, but I'm done drawing. So, let me go to what I'm good
so
at.
so Christian, who told you these weren't good? Who told you that?
Me, because I could see
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not critical of only everyone else. I'm critical of myself as well. And I was like, this is not great. I mean, you all know my father, so I'm a firstborn of a, I would say, a critical parent. so so I am just naturally very critical of most things and people and everything. So including myself. So yeah, that's a whole different 5-hour podcast. But yeah, for sure.
Okay, okay. Well, I think that would be something you would carry into your adulthood, like you said. I think that may be something you've learned or
Yeah.
picked up, but
Yeah, I mean, actually,
yeah.
that critical nature, I've used that to further my career, and it works very well in my professional environment a lot of times because I'm on teams where I get to be the one to point out maybe a flaw in logic, or hey, wait a minute, maybe this doesn't work for this plan, or hey, here's how we can improve this thing. So I get to be super critical, and it's like, hey, thank you for that. Then I come home and I got to try to turn it off because no one asked my opinion about how to fix that thing. So
Right. Yeah. Can't be critical everywhere.
no,
No.
you can't. I'm still working through it. I might get it in the next 30 years or so, but it's a
Mm,
struggle.
yeah. And not to just pick on you and Nate, well, Nate and Christian, Tim,
Mm.
I
Mm.
never understood how you showed up at church. I never knew how you showed up. Did you guys ever think about this? Think about this. This guy just
He really
showed up. We
did.
don't know where he came from.
Well,
Well, I
no,
mean,
I never thought about
keep
it.
in
So,
keep in
Think about that. Think about that for a minute.
keep in mind. I
Yeah,
mean,
he would blow through on occasion.
like
He would just be there.
a lot of people, a lot of my family, my whole family at the time was going to
was
that
at
church.
church. Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was
but
where
I was always really jealous of you because you didn't have to be there every Sabbath.
the see that's what you and
Or
I
did
was about to
he?
say exactly. That was what you guys didn't think. I had to be there because so you got to think about my family structure. It was just it was, for a long time it was just me and my mother until we moved to Seattle, right? And if I wanted to see my family more than holidays, I saw them at church. You know, this is where like if I wasn't seeing my family, like especially after I moved to Seattle, because when I moved to Seattle, I was living in Holly Park. Only thing was around me was hood, and
Right.
if I didn't go to church, I didn't really see the more positive people in my family. Like, well, not at the time, like my grandfather, you know,
Hmm.
and a lot of those Sabbath conversations that I had with my grandfather was part of the reasons why the things that was going on in Holly Park didn't really interest me and pull me into those negative directions.
Right.
So so there was a lot of reasons, and everybody told me I was a golden child, so I had to be at church, and I had to be at church, and that was it, and there was no discussion about it. So there was like, yeah, you got to be there, and if you don't come, then we're gonna come get you, and that's literally what they
But
told me.
but you weren't always there though.
No, I was not. I was not um, because reasons.
Listen, I'm just saying. I remember you. I remember out of all four of us, I was there. I think the most.
Yes.
And then second was between Chris and Steve. I think maybe Steve, because Chris got to go to.
Yeah, once I moved and I literally lived walking distance from a different church that I could wake up later. Once they let me
Yeah,
do that, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely doing
yeah. So
that.
and that also made me jealous because I wanted to not be there. Like I don't know when you all weren't there. Like yeah, I did not want to be there because there was nothing there to do. You know.
That's kind of how I
So
feel now.
yeah. Now the tables have turned.
Well, I think we kind of get the gist here. I think that we can go and there's lots of stories I could bring up. I remember a lot, a lot. I remember a lot, and
Well, I would like to know, Steve, because I remember we discussed a little bit before, off the podcast, but you did kind of mention that you felt like things weren't the way that you had perceived them when you were growing up. Is that stemming from what you think we were like experiencing as kids, or what made you come to that conclusion?
I think that as I grew older, I started to I think my expectations for what a healthy relationship looked like, I think that changed. I think I may never have given that a lot of thought before because a lot of it was circumstantial, situational. And then I've grown and the situations have changed enough for me to see, okay, here's the difference. I can now contrast it against something. And I think that does open your eyes. Kind of like what I might have done with you in the store. I was like, okay, so you know how you thought things were. And then I kind of contrast it and say, okay, so watch this. And then I then showed you how things really were.
Hmm.
I think I might have gone through something like that myself. And so I sometimes look at the relationships that I've had for a long time now that I would, say are for the most part healthy. And I compare those to the relationships that I thought I had in the past, and I would have described those as healthy. And I think there's something missing.
Mm.
There's something that's not the same. And so I think as we all eventually ended up leaving uh, the traditions that were established in our childhood, some of us left physically, some of us left in other ways, and I think that that process of leaving, and maybe maybe I shouldn't even say the word leaving, but as we grew up, that may just be a better way of describing this. As we grew up, I think now I question stuff. So going back to what Christian says, I think I am critical with my new gained information about how things probably should have been relative to how I reflect on them being. And so, yeah, I definitely think I question a lot of stuff that I thought was a certain way. Now I think
All right, Steve.
it was not the way I
I'm going to
thought.
interrupt you because you're saying a lot of very vague, generic things, and I know I'm not following 100%. So, hey, look, we don't got to be vague. We don't got to be generic.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean
You're talking
we're not
about
hiding
how
anything
you
here.
thought things were away, but they're not, but they could have been
Yeah,
specifically.
so I would say this. I would have expected us to all stay close much longer than we actually did, for an example. Like we all literally just dropped the mic, I
Yeah.
guess. That's what everybody did, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like even coming and having this conversation here on this podcast is just interesting to me. This is
Got it.
really
So
interesting. Never would have
yeah.
thought this.
So I have a question, Steve. So growing up, how many
Hmm.
homes did you live in?
I would say one.
One.
Yeah,
How many
close.
churches did you attend growing up?
So we would need to define this, but I would say
Two.
two. I would say there's two
Too
significant.
significant.
Yes.
See, as I look at it now, I'm analyzing Steve. I think
Hmm.
part of it for you might be you had this kind of stability that I don't think the three of us experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I grew up in Charlotte up to about 7. Even within that
Mm-hmm.
city, I think we had maybe 3 different homes, maybe 4. By the time I was 7, we moved to Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
then we moved to Federal Way for a year, then Linden for 2.5 years. Then I was in Kent. Then I was then Auburn. Right. Then I went to school. We moved to Puyallup. I went to school in Michigan. Then at the end of my junior year of college, I switched schools, Tennessee, then back over to Washington State to work, then moved to Maryland. So for for me, I think I learned at a young age, I became very comfortable with having to like start over and having to like more or less not abandon old friends, but like, back in the day, I moved from Charlotte to Michigan. I'm not seeing them ever again. Right. So for me, it became very easy to like, all right, cool. Like that was great. Now I'm over here. On top of that, me being very focused on like my immediate environment, like I can never have a a long distance relationship because they're not here. And if you're not here, I have a very hard time like focusing on people that aren't here. Even my parents, like they'll tell you I call them monthly, maybe. You know, I the people that I call the most are them and my brother, and that might not even be monthly. Like I talk to you all more than my family, literally, and it's not even that often. So I think for me, I never expected that we would stay together because for me, we kind of knew each other because we went to the same church. And once that didn't exist anymore, I I would have been surprised if it had continued. I mean, as far as friends I have from back then that I talk to now, it's you guys. Like there's people that I might message on Facebook like every 3 or 4 years. And even you guys, we started talking this way because I had some random Facebook group that I figured, hey, let me grab some friends since I don't have any. That's a whole nother podcast. But just think about my own experience. I think contrasting that with your experience, I think it's so different that I think
Yeah.
expectations of like things continuing, I think was a little bit different. I'm not sure how Nate, you and Tim feel about that, or your
I think that's
experience.
actually funny because yeah, I mean, I did not share Steve's idea of maintaining a like I said. So I wasn't able to stay in contact with my friends from elementary school, but I would have liked to been able to. But even though Chris and I we think very very much alike, I always thought in my head, I didn't think that we weren't going to remain friends. I thought we would remain friends regardless of whatever it is that happened. Like I felt, oh, we'll meet up at some future time, you know? Like I didn't and I guess now that I'm saying this and I'm thinking about what we just previously talked about me not being aware, it wasn't something that sorry, it wasn't something that negatively impacted me that we weren't. I remember I would think of you all, every single one of you. I would think of you all. I wonder how you all were doing, and then hope that you were well. And then that was it, because I just felt like it wasn't a time for, you know. And like I'm like Chris, where I am focused on the things that are just, immediately around me, which I guess would also explain why I wasn't aware of, racism and stuff like that. I never personally experienced racism, so I didn't realize that this was a thing. I suppose I am not a psychiatrist, so I don't really know, but yeah. And likewise, I contact my mom once a month and my dad even less. I contact him almost once a year on our birthday because we share the same birthday. You know, this year has been, I guess, different because I've maybe talked to him 3 times so far. You know,
Okay.
yeah, right. My family, my own brothers and sisters, like they have to call me and tell me why aren't you calling us? Because like Chris said, they're not here, so I'm not, you know, really paying attention. But it doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about him and that it doesn't mean that I always, okay, so the concept that I always have for myself is that when we meet up again, it will be as if no time has passed. We'll
Right.
have a lot of things to share. We'll be able to talk about everything, you know, and and blah blah blah. Like it's never been an issue for me. I just never considered it that way. I don't know how you feel about that, Tim
and then
or
and then
Steve.
and then there's me, where
Yeah.
I went to three different elementary schools and I moved different neighborhoods every year. My mom did not like staying. She always found a reason to leave. Next year we're moving. That was it. So the concept of long-term friendships from an early age never even mattered to me. I'm like, what's your name, James? Oh, okay, I won't know you next year.
I'm
You know.
right.
Right.
And so that's pretty much how I lived, and it didn't matter to me at all. And I didn't really start considering long-term relationships, like having long-term friends, until I'm like until I started, um like I'll put it like this: the longest friend I've actually known, and a lot of it I don't remember, but I do remember, was Steve. And that's because we also went to a different church, and we ran up and down the aisles together. So that's the longest relationship I know of, you know. But that's because Steve was in a place where no matter where I was at, I was always there, you know. So he wasn't in a school that I was leaving. He wasn't in a neighborhood that I was leaving. That was a stable place, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So until I stopped going, and then I came
Yeah.
back, and then I stopped going, and then I came back. so so but like for school friends, like I went to Hazelwood. I went to Highlands Elementary, Hazelwood, and I can't remember the third one now. But I went, so all my friends from school, I whatever, I didn't know them. And if I did find a friend that went from one school and then ended up at the same school I ended up in, that was weird. And I was like, I don't want to get to know you again. It was that kind of thing, because I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna be here like a year or two, and then I'm gonna leave. Whatever. Um, so my concept of friends was always fleeting, you know. So once I started hanging out with you guys, and then I realized, hey, I've been knowing these guys more than a year or two now. You know, uh, real friends. It was that. It was
Question
that
mark?
kind of thing for me. Yeah, it was that kind of thing for me. And so and I'll tell you guys, sometimes a lot of the times when I did come to church, you guys were the pull. So let's not have that lost on you guys. You guys were the pull.
We were the
The pull.
pool.
One of the things that made me come back.
Pull,
Oh,
Nate. There
okay.
we go.
The
PUL.
pull.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the
What do you
pool,
think I said?
the
Well, I
pull.
thought you were talking to the pool.
He
Yeah, I
was.
was like,
I was like, that's an
am
interesting
I missing something
phrasing.
here?
It's some
So
new slang the kids are using.
yeah, right. So because I told myself, like I want to see my friends, and this is the only place I apparently I can see them because, so that so
It's true.
yeah,
Yeah,
so that was the
because I
reason
mean,
why a lot of it.
apart from the church, like we were all separated. I think out of all of you, the person I may have seen the most outside of church. Well, actually, I don't know. Now it'd be between Chris and Steve. Actually, but I don't recall. Like, yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, we saw the. I saw the most of you all when we were in church, and which is also something that really. Um I remember that hurt me actually because when you all started, when Chris was able to go to another church, Tim would. I would never knew when Tim was coming to church. Like I was like, oh no. And then Steve also, I think he got a car and then he was just wasn't there anymore or
He
something like.
was
Or oh no,
gone,
you started
driving
driving. Yeah, he
around.
just started driving, and then he wasn't there anymore. We didn't have a car, and
He was going to
I
different
always
churches.
had to go. Yeah, and I always had to go to the same church. And then I think there was a few times where I my mom wouldn't let me go with you all if you were going somewhere. So
Oh,
that was
I
just
know that
also
pain. Hey, can I
yeah,
go with
right.
my friend? No.
No.
Okay, I can't go, guys.
So and I do remember vividly, like I remember when, because Steve, you left for university and when 99? Did you leave in 99?
I started going to school. Oh, I started my undergrad then, but no, I actually finished undergrad there in Seattle, like a transfer type
Right.
of
Yeah.
setup, and
Hmm.
then I left like in 2002 or 2003, I think,
Oh, you left in
right around there.
2003?
I think so,
Because
yeah.
I
I mean, I left before I left. See, that's the
Right,
problem. That's what we're
exactly.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
here.
you were
Yeah.
because I remember I felt like you had left. I thought you had left, and I remember I was sad because I was just like, oh my goodness, like everyone's leaving, and you had left. I wasn't sure. I thought I was going to be staying in Seattle actually, which I really did not want to. I remember you, me, Chris, all talking about we do not want to be here. Like we didn't want to be in Seattle, and you said when I leave, I'm not coming back. That's what you said. That's what you said, and that's what you
Gotta
did.
be careful what we say for them. Yeah, we gotta be careful. Words come to reality.
So, so, and I wanted that to be my reality, except it wasn't. I left and then I came back and left and came back, and then I finally left and I stayed gone for good. So, um, yeah. So, anyways, yeah,
And then
I
I'm still here.
perceived it in the. Yeah, you're still there. I perceived it in a different manner, but I didn't perceive it as our friendship ending. I just felt like I didn't even. I just felt like it was like a pause, like yeah. And besides, we also didn't have the tools at the time to really stay in contact with each other until social media really became a thing.
Right. I think we could use AIM or something or MSN Messenger. I remember
Or a
talking to people
phone.
back then, or like Yahoo Messenger. Not the phone.
No,
Tim, no
no,
one's
Not the
calling
phone.
that was
anybody.
impossible.
Nobody's
That was
calling
impossible.
anyone. No.
No, I called Steve. Me and Steve would be on the phone for like hours. I remember like 2 hours. My mom would actually literally tell me I needed to hang up. Should I? Like that was a thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, once we were in like at Andrews and stuff like or yeah, at Andrews and stuff like that, like it was almost impossible. It was expensive, so
Yeah.
it was going to happen.
Well, hey, you guys, excellent conversation. I think that this has been a very timely conversation, and I'm hoping that this gets lots of hits. So we'll see how the audience takes up what we've talked about. And clearly, there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah.
Because we can go into after we left what happened. I definitely saw Chris a number of times in him going to a school. He moved to a school closer to where my school was for a bit, and then me, Nate, actually or me, Nate, and Christian, we all ended up working together one summer,
Yeah.
Yeah.
random. And
That
the
was
story
really
does
random.
continue,
That was really
and
random.
the story does continue. So you'll have to come back for another episode of how does our childhood affect our adulthood. So unless there's any final words, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode up.
Yeah, we're make sure to check us out on all our social medias. We're supposed to be getting a generic for that, but until then,
Yeah.
check us out on Twitter, Facebook, um, YouTube, and Instagram.
And Instagram. Instagram's a little weak, but it's out there for y'all. But yeah, if you want to
Right.
find us, just search unofficially opinionated. For now, there's no one trying to copy us. So if you see it out there and you see the right logo, it's probably us. But if
Yes.
you're not sure, shoot a
Absolutely.
message and we'll get back to you.
And don't forget
Eventually.
to subscribe and like,
Absolutely.
and to follow on our socials.
And on YouTube.
And if you have any, yes, and if you have any like comments, just put them in there, and we definitely respond.
Yeah, and
So,
if you have ideas for, topics for the podcast, let us know. We're always looking
oh,
for
definitely.
things to discuss. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Is that
All
it?
right.
All right, I
All
think so.
right.
That's it.
Well, I guess we can say bye,
Bye,
Tim.
Tim.